Welcome to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, the podcast where we explore the beautiful, messy and transformative magic that happens when we dare to go within. I'm your host, Robin Harris, and in each episode we'll dive into real, honest stories from people who've faced their fears, embraced their vulnerabilities, and discovered unexpected growth in their personal lives, careers, or businesses. This is a space for deep listening, open hearts, and soul-nourishing conversations. Because when we meet ourselves in our rawest moments, that's often where our greatest wisdom starts. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to another episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. And today I have the most wonderful guest with me. And I met Gabi through networking, and we are so in alignment with the work that we do and with how we see the world and our healing journey. So I'm delighted to have you here with me today, Gabi.
Oh, so lovely to be here, Robin. Thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure completely. And I will just start, as usual, by giving an introduction for Gabi. She is a connection and purpose coach who specializes in helping self-doubters and overthinkers to find direction and clarity by reconnecting them to their true selves and helping them discover their unique gifts and purpose. Her work is focused on uncovering and celebrating the authentic expression and unique gifts of each person she connects with, so they in turn are empowered to make their contribution to the world. Her vision for humanity is that of a large, colourful mosaic with each individual finding their place and making their unique contribution to help unite us all. Gabi, that is so beautiful. I can picture that mosaic. I often talk about a tapestry, but it is that idea, isn't it, of all those different colours and how they actually do weave together so beautifully when we allow ourselves to express our gifts without masking or fears or any of those other things that get in the way.
Exactly, Robin. It's so true. And I think that's the story of so many of us because we do mask, we do hide, we do pretend to be somebody that we're not.
Sadly, yes, so often we do. And just before we get stuck into our conversation proper, I'm going to ask you the three questions that I ask all my guests. What makes your story relatable for others?
Well, I think my story is all about working out who I am, where I belong, what I'm here for. And I think so many of us relate to that. We feel we get lost somewhere along the way. And I think we get snowed on under by responsibilities, obligations, expectations. That could be in our jobs and our relationships. And I don't know, even our roles as parents. And I think there's lots of people like me who've come to feel that life has become like a series of obstacles and limitations, and it's made them compromise who they are.
Yeah, and I'm sure that is touching a lot of hearts as we listen in to what you're saying there. And who do you feel will gain the most from listening to this conversation?
I think it could be the people that are looking for direction and meaning. So the people that feel frustrated and trapped in some way, trapped in mediocrity, that feel guilt or shame to have fallen short of their own expectations, and but the sense that time is running out, but no idea how they can change it.
And
So
what do you hope those people will take away from this conversation?
I'd love them to take away the fact that every challenge and difficult thing is in fact a gift. So that in our attempt to overcome it and our strategy to try to not feel the discomfort, those are the actual gifts because that's what makes us who we are. And it also serves as a clue that points the way to our purpose. So we have so much more potential than we've learned to believe we have. And there's something important inside of us that's wanting to be expressed and shared. And there's all these clues in our reactions to everything around us. So for the most mundane things, our challenges and our life experiences. So that's what I want. The challenge is in fact the gift.
Beautiful, beautiful. That so resonates with my perspective as well, that it's in the messy that the real treasure lies, the real wisdom, the real, as you say, gift. And it leads us beautifully into where I was planning to start this conversation. You started out in the corporate world, but ended up feeling like you'd lost yourself. And you then went through a process of learning how to get back in touch with those emotions, those parts of yourself, especially the difficult ones. Would you tell us a little bit about what that looked like and how it felt for you?
Yeah. So basically, I think for all my life, even before I joined the corporate job, I kind of learned like it was all good to feel happy, to show all the happy feelings, and to always make people realize that, well, make them feel that you were okay. And I would never, ever want to show them that I was having a hard time or that I was in some way vulnerable or sad or anything like that. Because I even had that upbringing from my mum. I was rewarded for not crying. So this, I think, is something that happens a lot in general. So I went into this job, which I absolutely loved. It was in tourism. It took me abroad, and I loved that job when I first started. And it became more and more, I think lots of people will resonate with this. The corporate world has changed so much, and we are just numbers. But what starts off as a real passion can then become very difficult with all the rigid limitations that all these I think the financial pressures within the corporate world put on us. So we start changing the way that we respond. We start having to fit into boxes. And I think that's where I started shrinking. I really noticed that there were certain things I couldn't say anymore. I had to write emails in a certain way. I had to copy in the right people, say the right thing. And you were expected to be flexible. You weren't allowed to say no or ask questions or all this kind of thing. And I think it just slowly made me just shrink and not express myself anymore. Apart from that, I became a mother. I had all the financial pressures. And I think you had all the expectations I had of myself as a mother, and feeling that I couldn't fulfill them. Your children are never quite what you expect them to be. They don't react. You think it's going to be easy to deal with certain situations, and you feel the stress, how it takes over, how you start reacting to your children in a way you don't want to. So I slowly became like a shell of myself. I was really not me, not how I expected it to be. And then I came out. I got to a point where I had a medical issue. I had asthma that came in. Ended up going to a homeopath, and he stopped me in the middle of me explaining what I had. He said, "No, but tell me exactly what you feel." And I was explaining, yes, I have issues breathing. And he said, "No, but tell me what exactly you're feeling. What is that feeling?" And I started talking about the repression, about the pressure I felt, about it was literally my physical feelings, and they were an exact mirror of what was going on in my life. And it was that restriction and that pressure. And then literally the tears started streaming. I went, oh my goodness, I didn't expect to be coming into some kind of a therapy session. And but yeah, he basically gave me a medication that worked miracles. And I think that was the start of my sort of leaving the tunnel, coming out of the tunnel. And bit by bit, when I finally was laid off at work, and then I started going into the self-development space, started training as a coach, and my first course was all emotions based, and it opened up a world to me. And the first thing I kept noticing is that people on my course are able to share their emotions, and I can't. I can only say that I'm fine. And the other bits are hard to share. And it was the vulnerability piece that really sort of broke me open. I thought, I'm going to have to start really connecting, because that's the only way that this will make a difference. And that's where it kind of changed. I started becoming aware of sadness, of grief, of anger, all those suppressed things that we had there latent under the surface.
It's interesting going back to what you were saying about our upbringing. And we, even if it's not explicit, it might just be subtext that we are expected to behave in a certain way. And you can understand why parents don't want their child to cry, or don't want their child to be angry, or in school how it's easier if everybody just plays along and doesn't disrupt the class and all of those kinds of things. But the amount of expectation that you take on board as the receiver of that, and how we can then shape our personality, almost shape how we behave, shape how we connect with what's actually going on inside and how we're actually feeling, because of that sense of expectation and the shoulds and the have tos and the musts that we follow at the expense of, well, how am I actually feeling, my authenticity, my truth, and how there's a lot of shame around feeling I can't express my truth. I can't say that actually I'm struggling here, or I'm finding this difficult, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling angry, because nice girls don't get angry. Whereas anger is actually just to me, it's like an intruder alert. It's an alarm to say somebody is threatening, or your perception is that your boundaries are being threatened.
I
So
think, yes, I think
and it gives
it's,
us
yeah, you're
the energy to take action.
absolutely. That's the thing. Our emotions are there as signaling mechanisms that are telling us this is something important to you, and this is where you're in alignment, and this is where you're not. It's really interesting if you get to the bottom of how emotions work. So this is one of my big passions. I think one of the words that you mentioned before, one of the emotions that's really important, is shame. There's actually two emotions that are socialized, that's shame and guilt. And shame and guilt are actually sitting on top of our other very basic emotions, like anger, like you mentioned, and sadness. And it's those moments that we've been conditioned by the people around us, our own parents, because we're looking for their love and recognition all the time from as a child. And so if there are certain emotions that are allowed to be expressed and others that are not, because our own parents also have discomfort around certain emotions, then we start sort of editing them out of our lives. We don't want to feel them anymore. So it's shame and guilt that sit on top of them. And once we start looking at our shame and guilt, and we start realizing which are the bits that are actually ours and which have been imposed on us and we've integrated into our way of being, it's fascinating what you can find there. And actually starting to feel those emotions that are sitting underneath, it's like a release. It's incredible. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm actually really angry. And what does that mean? This is important to me. This is something I have to pay attention to.
It can be deeply challenging, and even it can be quite scary, can't it? Because those emotions can be quite big, and we have suppressed them for a reason. They haven't felt safe for a reason. So to go there when we have practiced for such a long time going there can be really challenging, which is why it can be helpful sometimes just to have somebody there walking alongside us while we do that. But I loved you mentioned those two emotions, guilt and shame. And for me, a big learning was when I came across Brene Brown saying the difference between the two, because quite a lot of people use the words almost interchangeably, and there isn't often a clear distinction in the way that people talk about the two. But guilt being the fact that we feel bad about something we've done, whereas shame being the fact we feel bad about who we are.
Yeah.
So it's much more limiting, and it's quite a challenging emotion to feel and to work through. But just going on from there, then, what do you have? Any tips for how we reintegrate these emotions when we do realize actually what I'm feeling is anger or guilt or shame? I'm not actually feeling happy. I've been saying I'm fine, but that's not actually the truth of how I'm feeling when I dig down deep and really connect with my authentic feelings. How might we then start to reintegrate those ones that we find so challenging?
Okay, well, everything that I do with anyone is I always want to make it fun. It's fun, it's playful. Let's use these emotions. So once we start realizing that every emotion has a message attached to it, then it gives us this way in to find out what's underneath it. And I don't want that to be like become like a really big, sad, difficult thing to do. It does bring us to those things, but at the same time, we come out with a message that also is really positive. So it's there. So if it does, I think the idea is that we don't judge any of it. And I think it's so easy to judge. And if we start having some compassion and some curiosity, those are magical. That's where everything changes. Because if we say, well, actually, it's a clue to something. So you see yourself as a detective rather than the person who's blaming or trying to, avoid a certain difficult feeling, I think you then start seeing it as a game. And this is what I like to do for every emotion that somebody feels. That well, the message actually is this. And then when they get to that, there's questions you can ask about that. What's sitting underneath that? What's your real values? What are your real desires? What part is yours and what part have you learnt? And so then you get to some real truths there, and it's liberating. It's fun.
I
So that's
love how
really,
you talked about that and how we can almost turn it into a game. And people talk about gamifying, don't they? So how we can see it as a puzzle. It's just something to play with, and we just get to learn more about ourselves and we get to grow. And yes, it can feel vulnerable, but by going in with, like you say, compassion and curiosity, I read somewhere recently about anything that comes up, just meet it with compassion. And wild, the L in wild is about loving ourselves because we spend so much time, don't we, beating ourselves up and criticizing ourselves and taking on board those negative things that are reflected back at us. Oh, you shouldn't feel this way and that way is wrong. Not that any feeling is actually right or wrong, it just is. But we get these impressions and we start to label our emotions as negative or positive and good or bad versus that's just how I feel. And it's just like you say, it's just telling me something. So what might it be telling me? And it does become exciting and fun because we get to dig into it. And what am I learning about myself today? Every day really can be a school day, but a fun school day. And to know that it's okay, whatever I'm feeling, like you say, so liberating to know I can feel whatever. I don't necessarily have to act on it, but it just gives me information that I then get to choose. I don't have to react, but I can choose how I respond and what way I want to address this, having come to the understanding of what that emotion was showing me.
yeah, exactly. It's amazing. And then I take it another step further because what have we been doing all this time to avoid feeling that emotion? And that is where we see some of our gifts as well. So, okay, we've been avoiding it. Now we're seeing it actually has some messages. Great. Let's go and dig deeper, find that. But then what have we been doing all this time to avoid that emotion? These have been our strategies. What can we get out of that? So there's never any judgment in any of it, not in the avoidance of it and not in the actual feeling of it. All of it is our clues. And it's like, yes, let's find out what sits underneath that. This is now your gift. What have you got really good at doing? And it's just all of it has a gift and it makes you who you are. So this is where I like to take it.
Absolutely. That connection with it's okay to be me and who is that me? Because each one of us, like I was saying in the introduction, what your work does is help people to find who they are, their unique gifts. And each one of us has those, but maybe we're not seeing them because we're not allowing ourselves to connect with the fullness of who we are. But once we have this releasing, this liberation, all of a sudden we can come to see those and can come to explore, well, okay, I've discovered this about myself. How is that a gift? How can I find my purpose through that? How can I be who I was born to be by knowing I've got this gift and sharing it in the way that it is designed to be shared? And that doesn't have to be anything big. Sometimes when I was growing up, I always used to think purpose had to be something big and world changing. But it can just be being yourself, the fullest self you can be. And in doing that, giving everybody else permission to do the same.
Exactly. I mean, purpose is such a big thing, and it's happening in every single thing that you're doing every single day. It's just the way you are living your life, how you express yourself, even in the moments of limitation, even in those moments that you think that you are not being you. There's still something, some part of you that's still very much you, and that's unique to you. And I think in our limitations and how we react to them and our challenges, that is where we can get so much rich information, because it's in the things that we don't like that we can actually find what we do. And it's just that is where we can constantly find the truth. Okay, so if you're angry about that, what would you like to see instead? And how can you create that? And how are you already creating that in small ways in your life that you're not even noticing? And I think these gifts that we talk about, we always think of these big, outstanding, talented people, aren't we? But for them to get there, they've practiced something a lot. And we're all practicing something a lot, but in a very different way, perhaps, than from maybe like a famous athlete or a musician. We are doing little things in our lives all the time, and we've actually become very good at them. So, where does that fit into the big puzzle piece of yourself? And how does that fit into your purpose? So, your purpose isn't just one thing, like you said, it's lots of things. It's what we're doing all the time. It doesn't have to be, some great big final picture, but it is all working towards something. And a purpose is nothing if it isn't a contribution to the rest. So it is a purpose isn't just for yourself. So everything that we're doing is actually, if we can put it all together, creates a bigger picture, and is how you are relating to the world. And very often we're keeping that part small because we don't know what we're contributing. We're doing it in lots of small ways already around us, but we don't know what that bigger thing looks like. And that's also where I like to bring all of those pieces together. So there is actually something much bigger, but we are expressing it in small ways, and we can express it in a much bigger way.
It's that interconnection and interdependence that we might think, I'm a tiny little thing, but we're a cog in the big machine. And
Absolutely.
whatever we do impacts on everybody else around us and further afield as well. And the idea that it's not necessarily what we do, but how we do it. And of course, how we choose what we do then has an impact on that as well. But it's very much for me the how we're doing things, because that is what you're saying, that awareness and that being authentic and that bringing that liberation and that energy into everything that we do.
I think you've hit on some really important things there. And I think it is that interconnection. It's once we start sharing those little things and we're noticing it, the energy that we're putting out there can be positive or negative. And if we're starting to notice the bits that are important to us and we're starting to express those, other people will resonate, and you'll start creating new links with people. The amount of people I started relating to differently, even just somebody in a shop or whatever that I hardly knew, just because I started noticing my own hang-ups and my own insecurities, and then started realizing, no, this is what I like doing, and people react well to me when I'm myself. Once I started being really truthful, I just saw those things shift so much. So then once you start shifting in that sense, then and expressing yourself exactly as you are without trying to hold back, you then get new connections, new friends, new people. You meet new people, and you find your tribe. And it's in that connection with others. And this is one of the things that very often I see in my clients, is that they do very much stay within their own little worlds, and they don't go out there and they don't have their tribe. Once they start expressing who they are and find their tribe naturally, that's where everything changes. And it is in connection with others. And it's whether that comes through a challenge at first, but it is through that friction that we have outside of us that we also get the feedback and get the clues. So it really all interconnects. So once we start welcoming that friction, we start changing, then we start looking at ourselves differently, then we start relating differently to others, and then we start attracting different people, or people react to us differently, and it's just one big incredible thing. So this is how I see it, like you said, the interconnection, the way that it all links up, because that's how this reciprocity, this relational field, and it is all transformational.
know, for myself years ago, I used to think if only that thing was different and if only they behaved differently. And it was out, out, out. Everything was looking outward and wanting things out there to be different. And then I, through my learning and growth, started working within and began to realize the only thing I have any control over is the inside stuff. My thoughts, what I engage with, how I choose to do things, my ability to respond rather than react. And like you say, you start to do things differently and then you realize, but things are changing without me trying to change them. I'm changing within, and then people respond to me differently and things happen differently and it all starts to shift. And it's not that big and it's not that difficult or painful, and it's just tiny, tiny little shifts done repeatedly and then incrementally. And that really is what makes the difference. It seems when you talk about it to like, that's not very much, but it is the thing that actually is effective, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, life is literally a mirror. And this is like one of my this is one of my biggest games that I play with my clients, is that literally everything that's happening in your life, the most mundane small things, is literally mirroring back something to you that's going on inside of yourself. And so once we start playing that game, it gets really fun. So then you start seeing how those little changes, those little tweaks, like you said, can be very small inside of yourself, accepting the bit that you've been judging. Suddenly outside of ourselves, that changes as well. We no longer notice it. It no longer bothers us. It no longer triggers us. Everything changes.
So, just as we draw to a close, what key message would you like people to take away?
I think I mentioned it earlier, that every challenge is a gift. I think that's the key message. See if you can start learning how in everything that we find difficult out there, we can actually find a gift that's for us, to find out who we really are, what we're here for, what we're about. I think then life completely changes. And we no longer see things as limitations, but as freedom. So yeah, that was my key message.
So beautiful, such a wonderful thing to take away and to start to play with. And lastly, then, Gabby, would you just let people know where they can find you? Because I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this and thinking, oh, I need to talk to this woman. I need to talk to Gabby. Where can they find you?
Well, I'm really not been great on anything online because I've done everything through referrals, but I am starting to, well, I've started building my website, which should hopefully very soon be live. In the middle of doing it at the moment. And I've got my Facebook and I've got Instagram. You can message me on there, anyone, to get hold of me.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in to this episode. It has been a wonderful one. I'm sure you'll agree. If you would like to follow more, do remember to hit that subscribe button and share with your friends. And then I will see you back for the next episode. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. I hope it's given you a moment to breathe, reflect, and perhaps even see your own story with a little more compassion. If you find this conversation meaningful, I'd love it if you'd share, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps others find their way here too. Until next time, take gentle care, and remember, the journey inwards is where the real growth begins.